Welcome to the channel, everyone. Thanks for joining me in the record room today. My name is Doug if you're new here. The month of February is the so-called Reggae month, so declared to promote the music and the culture that originated from Jamaica. For those of us long steeped in it, perhaps every month of the year is Reggae month, but that one holds a special significance. There's always some special events scheduled. This year of February 2024 saw the high-profile, highly anticipated release of a biographical film on the King of Reggae, Bob Marley. Haven't yet seen it myself, yet it was preceded by a bit of sadness as Bob Marley's bass player and band leader, the legendary Aston Family Man Barrett, passed away early in the month, and unfortunately the month would conclude in some ways an even sadder and more unexpected note as one of the kings of reggae of the past 30 years, the more modern era, suddenly passed away. I'm talking about Peter Morgan, who often used the more Africanized spelling of Peetah, who was the lead singer of Morgan Heritage, a band he had formed with his siblings, who became one of the most popular and internationally successful reggae acts of the last 30 years. The Morgans were all children of Denroy Morgan, an expatriate Jamaican who had moved to New York in the 1960s, where he worked a variety of jobs, working in a delicatessen, working as a butcher, driving taxi, and as time progressed, he began to grow more aware of his identity as a transplanted African, began to discover Rastafari, and also formed a New York-based reggae band called the Black Eagles, who released one album called Warning in the late 1970s, Warning by the Black Eagles, featuring Denroy Morgan. This is a CD reissue from VP Records. By the early 1980s, Denroy would go solo and score a chart hit with the funk-oriented I'll Do Anything for You and an album of the same name. Meanwhile, he was growing his family, would ultimately have a brood of reportedly 29 to 30 children, of which would arise Morgan Heritage. The children would be raised between rural Massachusetts, where they would attend school, reportedly a better education system there, but weekends they would spend in Brooklyn, New York with their father, where he had a home studio and would instruct them in musical training, getting them to pick up instruments, determining who would play what, and schooling them in Jamaican harmonizing, the long-standing Jamaican tradition of group vocalizing. At home, they would be steeped in music, everything from the reggae of Toots and the Maytals, the Heptones, and Steel Pulse, to country and western, hip-hop, rhythm and blues, and many other genres besides. They were raised as members of the House of Rastafari, known as the 12 Tribes of Israel, the same group that Bob Marley was a member of, yet they were also exposed to the wider cultural palette of growing up in America, diverse range of influences. As the youths began to grow older, they began to form an official group. By 1992, Denroy would organize an appearance for them at the Reggae Sunsplash Festival held in Montego Bay in Jamaica before the notoriously tough to impress Jamaican audience, who would have been none too inclined to favor a reggae group coming to Jamaica from America. Yet the group was well received and were swiftly signed to a deal by major label MCA Records. They would record some songs with the rhythm partnership of Sly and Robbie, yet unfortunately the resulting debut LP, 1994's Miracle, was something of a pop-oriented crossover misfire. The group Morgan Heritage, later disavowing it as a corporate MCA record on which they had merely performed. They would regroup, continue performing live, building their reputation. 1995 would see them make a trip to Africa, to the Ivory Coast, and on that year, their father, Denroy Morgan, would instigate them to relocate to Jamaica, not to the capital city of Kingston, but to the most rural parish of St. Thomas, Jamaica. There, in a relaxed country environment, free from pressure, a natural environment, they would continue working, continue honing their craft, and also grow more in tune with their culture as Jamaicans, as young Rastafarians, and begin to ingratiate themselves into the local Jamaican music scene. That year, through a radio personality named Dennis Howard, they were introduced to reggae producer Robert Dixon, known as Bobby Digital. Bobby Digital, the preceding year, had done some landmark recordings with a young singer by the name of Garnet Silk, heavily spiritual and focused on roots and culture material, a style of classic roots reggae which had gone out of favor on the island itself in favor of some of the brasher dance hall excesses of the 1980s, but a tide was beginning to turn, and singer Garnet Silk would emerge as a figurehead of a return to traditional values of musicianship, of conscious and cultural themes in reggae music. But Garnet Silk suddenly passed away in a tragic accident in December 1994. It's Growing, the album he had produced with Robert Dixon, Bobby Digital. When Bobby Digital was introduced to the Morgans, they rolled up in a bus, apparently initially a somewhat larger lineup of the group. He was immediately struck by the purity of Peter Morgan's voice, Peter growing into a charismatic frontman of the group. His distinctive lead vocals, sometimes excitable, would immediately clue you in that you were listening to a Morgan Heritage song, and Peter's voice reminded him of Garnet Silk, and Bobby Digital decided to begin working with this young group. Some of the initial efforts of their collaboration would begin to surface on 45s, including their first landmark hit, the pleading, very cultural-oriented Protect Us Jah, on Bobby Digital's Digital B label, 7-single original from 1996. This rode a searing update of Bob Marley's Heathen Rhythm, over which the Morgans applied their trademark sibling harmonies. By this point, the group had coalesced into the classic quintet of Peetah Morgan on lead, his older brother Roy, teasingly nicknamed Gramps, who is a richer, deeper voice, quite gospel-infused, would often provide a counterpoint to Peter's more excitable tones, their sister Una, and also Memalatel, Mr. Mojo, so nicknamed, and Nakamia, aka Luke's. This would be the classic quintet that would form Morgan Heritage as they became known to a wider audience with their first major hit, Protect Us, Jah.
Oh God, oh God. Ooh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Seeds of humanity. Why can't we love each man equally? No matter the race, color, or creed. Ooh-wee. Let's take a look in the mirror, I say, and find our own sinful ways. That man without sin, let him come judge me. While I ask, what is this world coming to? Oh, Jah, guide us through. War and violence at its peak. Protect us, Jah, please.
The stunning, very culturally focused Protect Us, Jah, which, by the way, can be found on the compilation of Bobby Digital Productions' Flag Flown High with, if I'm not mistaken, Peter Morgan on the back, and also on the more recent Serious Times compilation from VP Records, Bobby Digital right there, was one of a number of songs announcing that a shift was going on in reggae music as the 1990s progressed. The traditional values of protest lyrics, lyrics praising His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Selassie, bringing back themes of Rastafari. These were all coming back into vogue again after some of the dance hall experiments of the 1980s and very early 1990s. The one-drop rhythm of 1970s reggae was back again. They were often redoing classic rhythms to provide a hook, a sense of familiarity for longtime listeners, just with a refreshed sound, incorporating modern technology and performed by a young generation of artists. It was a thrilling time to be getting into the music, what I would come to view as a new golden age for reggae music, maybe the last one, as we were discovering the vintage artists, Bob Marley and the Wailers, Culture, Burning Spear. It was all happening all over again on the contemporary scene, with new artists coming forth and bringing forward the same message again. Those early singles for Bobby Digital would result in Morgan Heritage's second LP, Protect Us, Jah, titled after that big hit, released in 1997. The cover, quite spiritual and Afrocentric. The group having finally found their own identity. A very young Peter Morgan over on the end, throwing up the love sign there, probably barely 20 years old at that point. And that was released on VP Records in 1997 in a nod to tradition. The very first song, the telling Set Yourself Free, rode an update of the classic 1960s rhythm from Studio One drum song, while Protect Us, Jah closed it with an update, as I said, of Bob Marley's Heathen Rhythm. In the meantime, the Morgans had also begun recording with another top-name producer who had made his name in dancehall in the preceding decade, King Jammy. This would swiftly result in their third LP, also released 1997, and featuring once again a stunning set of very roots and culture-oriented songs called One Calling. Morgan Heritage, One Calling, the title track calling for unity amongst the various houses of Rastafari, the Morgans themselves having been raised as 12 tribes. But in the 1990s, as the Cultural Revolution progressed, an order called the Bobo Dreads would begin to get more prominent, who were often recognized by the turbans they would wear on their head, and their sometimes gruffer and more aggressive methods of delivery and lyrical content.
This is for the children of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Go, Master Man, go make we try to go as Zion. Try to go as Zion like a lion. Go, Master Man,
1998 would see the Morgans building on the strength of the accomplishments they'd achieved thus far, expanding their network of connections within the Jamaican musical community to build friendships with many young and upcoming artists with a similar mindset as theirs, to bring forward roots and culture, themes of social protest and Rastafari back to reggae music. They would also expand their roster of producers they were working with producer Donovan Germain, big name of the era, on a song called The Comforter. The Comforter, the rhythm track they voiced over, was another traditional one from the past, brought up to date with an updated sound. In this case, it was the Mighty Diamonds' The Right Time, originally recorded in the mid-1970s. The Morgans would voice it as The Comforter, very spiritual, almost gospel song, and that would give a new name to the rhythm track that would appear on the Comforter Rhythm LP. Various artists with the Morgan Heritage Group leading off with the title track, The Comforter, for producer Donovan Germain, released on his Germain label. This was the era of the rhythm, producers releasing rhythms on which they would put out a number of 45s, different artists doing their own songs on the same bass music track, as reggae had been doing for many years at that point. 45s coming out from Jamaica every week. I was starting to buy some in this period. There was a couple of early websites you could order them from. I remember one in Germany would have sound samples, and every week I would be checking to see what the new singles coming out that week were, and they would be released in these kind of rhythm groups. There would be maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different 45s on the same label, different artists, but all sharing the basic rhythm track. And this one would also feature the Mighty Diamonds, who had originally done the song The Right Time that gave the Comforter rhythm its basic music track. They would come back again with a new song on it called Ja Love, and other very culturally minded artists such as Tony Rebel and Ja Molly would appear on it. Another so prolific had their Morgan's father, Denroy Morgan, been that a second group of Morgan siblings arose called LMS. They would also have a song on the Comforter rhythm. They were a trio whose name was an acronym for their own names, Laza, Miriam, and Shai Poo, slightly younger siblings to the Morgan Heritage members, more hip-hop and dance hall oriented, but two groups of Morgan siblings now out there in the late 1990s. This LP, The Comforter, would also feature a DJ by the name of Buju Banton, who would tour with the Morgans starting in 1999, I believe. Him and Gramps would form a very strong personal friendship, and they would collaborate on a song for Buju called The 23rd Psalm, inspired from the Bible and featuring Buju Banton chanting with the harmonies of the Morgan siblings. That can be found on the compilation Buju and Friends, Buju Banton with 23rd Psalm, featuring the Morgans on harmonies. As they continued to expand their roster of friendships with similarly like-minded artists, they would begin moving into self-production, starting up their own HMG label, and in 1998 they would release the Liberation Rhythm with a group of 45s appearing on HMG. They would take the title track itself, Liberation by Morgan Heritage, 1998 release. Another big hit from that rhythm track would be the Bobo Dread chanter Capleton doing Jaja City, The Bobo Dread, very aggressive, very gruff, very fire and brimstone oriented. And they would also release the Mount Zion medley on the also known as Liberation, on which the Morgans would trade verses with some of their peers, culturally minded singers by the likes of John Molly, Bushman, and others, the Mount Zion medley. That would appear as a one rhythm LP. These 45s would sometimes be collected in rhythm LPs like The Comforter, and that would appear in 1998 as a various artists LP called Morgan Heritage Family and Friends Volume 1. That would be followed the next year, I believe, by a second volume where the Morgans released another rhythm called Bus Up Barriers. Morgan Heritage, Bus Up Barriers, circa 1999, if I'm not mistaken, on the HMG label. And that would also feature Capleton Again, Mr. Mass Media, a duet with their father, Denroy Morgan, on Harvest is Plenty, Morgan Heritage with Denroy Morgan. Also, Buju Banton, by now a close friend, with Negus Nagast. John Mason, another very aggressive chanter, and Jacure. The Morgans continuing to build relationships. They hadn't started this cultural movement, this return to traditional themes and melodies in Jamaican reggae, but they were harnessing it. They were making it stronger and blaze that much brighter. Another various artists compilation they would release in 2000, produced by the Morgans, was Guns in the Ghetto.
Peetah touch rise and gone on them think with it done. Jacob Miller rise and gone them think with it done. Gone and Silky rise and gone, but look ya, Morgan family come rise. And then the rise to our uprising, Sizzler rise. And then the rise to his uprising, Luciano rise. And then the rise to his uprising, Rastafari come with so we come. Marley children rise. And then the rise to their uprising, Capleton rise. And David Oshu is uprising, put your rise. And then the rise to his uprising, Rastafari royal children come with liberation war. Whoa, chant war, Rastaman chant war. Whoa, chant war.
1998 going into 1999 would be another momentous period for the Morgans. They would continue releasing a string of 45s, many of them hits in the reggae world, heard all over the globe, dropped in dances, bumping from Jeeps on the road, played on the radio over and over. Many of them still played to this day, beloved wherever reggae is heard. They would continue expanding their roster of collaborators as the groundswell of roots and culture music coming from Jamaica continued to build strength. They would record for perhaps the top cultural music producer of the era, Philip Fatus Burrell and his Exterminator label, with Bubble in the Struggle by Morgan Heritage, appearing on the various artists' Armageddon Time release from Philip Burrell and his Exterminator label. By 1999, they would record their landmark fourth album, returning to Bobby Digital, Robert Dixon. For this project, Dixon decided to focus entirely on live instruments to support the Morgans. Reggae had gone digital in the 1980s, incorporating drum machines, synthesizers, before gradually evolving into something of a hybrid of electronic technology and live instruments. For these new songs with the Morgans, he decided to focus on entirely on live instruments, give their voices room to breathe, to sound more freed up, more natural. And so the music on these songs would be played by musicians like the top session band of the era, the Firehouse Crew, Sly and Robbie, and the Morgans themselves, all equally capable musicians. This would appear in 1999 as Don't Haffi Dread, their fourth LP. Peetah right at center there, released as always on VP Records. The title track, one of their major hits of the era, Don't Haffi Dread. Here's the digital B45 from 1999. Somebody's written Dreadlock on the label there, produced by Bobby Digital. This was somewhat controversial in some circles. You don't Haffi Dread to be Rasta. The Morgans saying that it's not a hairstyle that makes you a Rasta, it's what's in your heart, a divine conception of the heart. It's the content of your character rather than a hairstyle. Received somewhat controversially in some circles, but a major hit song for the group. Lead-off song, Reggae Roadblock, another bubbling one-drop rhythm as the group celebrates the healing power of the music while also acknowledging some of the hurdles it's had to face. So many great songs never heard on radio, so many great songs never seen by video. How long will your system defile our artists? Major hit for the group. And the final song on the LP, Don't Go, a touching R&B flavored duet between older brother Gramps Morgan and sister Una.
A dreadlock thing, divine conception of the heart. You don't have to dread to be Rasta. This is not a dreadlock thing, divine conception of the heart.
Another major hit for the Morgans circa 1999 was Reggae Bring Back Love, included on the CD version of the Don't Haffi Dread album, though not on the vinyl. The song announcing to the world that those traditional values of reggae music from the era of Bob Marley, from the era of Joseph Hill and culture, those vibes were back again in a big way, and it was now a pride of young lions and one lioness in Una leading the charge to bring it back as Morgan Heritage emerged as major superstars within the reggae world. They would begin touring internationally, building their following through relentless live performances over the years. Peetah developing into a world-class frontman. His brother, Gramps Morgan, recalled how one time they were playing at a rock festival in Poland before audience not really familiar with their music, about 150 people, and through sheer charisma and crowd interaction and personal energy, Peetah Morgan drawing in more and more people until they were hundreds of thousands strong. Masterful frontman, his vocals very much the trademark of Morgan Heritage, though often counterpointed by Gramps Morgan and the harmonies of the other siblings. 2001 issue of The Beat magazine out of America, California, featured the Morgans on the cover with Father Denroy standing next to Peetah as they continued to tour internationally. They made many appearances in Europe, particularly Amsterdam, many rapturous performances at the Paradiso Theater there from friends I've heard who attended. They release live albums and DVDs, Live in Europe 2003, capturing one of those sets in Amsterdam. Meanwhile, 2001 would see their next album, More Teachings, appear, once again on the VP label, and this would contain further hits for the group, such as Jaseed on their own 71 Records label. What We Need Is Love, and another one of their most beloved songs, Down by the River, writing an updated cut of the Cable's What Kind of World, originally released in the late 1960s. The Morgans revived the rhythm as Down by the River, one of their most beloved, very gospel-infused songs, celebrating the communal vibes of nature, of good food, and good companionship.
And the place Morgan Heritage loves to be is down by the river. Selassie. Yeah, yeah. Oh, my sister, can you help me sing? Sing, yeah, yeah. Everybody, Jamaica's calling. I'll be down by the river, yeah, waiting for the good Lord to pass my way. Oh, yeah, I'll be down by the river, yeah, singing songs of joy on this lovely day. So I got everything to say, oh, yeah.
As the resurgence of roots and culture music in Jamaica continued to build up steam in the early 2000s, the Morgans showed no signs of slowing down. The 3-in-1 LP from the siblings would appear in 2003. That one not in my collection, but one of the hits from it. By now, one of many from the siblings was the very soulful A Man Is Still a Man, appearing here on their 71 Records label. 2005 would see the Full Circle LP, once again appearing on VP Records, seeing them continue to expand their fan base, expand the parameters of their music while retaining roots, reggae, and Rasta as core elements of their music. Very first song, Jah Comes First, another blazing roots song. Hail Up the Lion, Uncomfortable, Babylon Will Be From This Day On. Do believe I have the 7-inch of that around as well. Meanwhile, Your Best Friend would be a duet with their younger siblings, their sibling group LMS. Remember the younger Morgan siblings, Laza, Miriam, and Shai Poo. That would be on an influential rhythm from producer Donovan Bennett, appearing on his Don Corleone label as Your Best Friend. The rhythm Drop Leaf, very influential around that time. That would be followed by another one from the Don Corleone label, one of their Morgan's most strikingly, pointedly political social protest songs, Tell Me How Come, appearing on the Seasons rhythm, a follow-up rhythm from Donovan Bennett, one of their classic tunes, taking to task some of the inequalities in Jamaican society, why education is different for kids from downtown versus those from uptown, mentioning some of their fellow artists by name, ones they felt had been done injustice. They would continue releasing albums at a steady pace. 2008 would see Mission in Progress, a very political album from them, with the back cover showing Peter holding a newspaper, now with his trademark gray stripe in place, Peter Morgan. This would see them take a very strident political stance. The Morgans never compromising their values of including social commentary in their music, never watering down the music, and they would pay tribute to some of the icons of the past on here by doing a rare cover version, Raid Roots Dance, having originally been done by Steel Pulse, one of their own musical influences coming up. While the Morgans would take the occasional break in times in years to come, sometimes branching off into solo projects. They would always return to the group vibes. 2013 would see Here Come the Kings released once again on VP Records, showing the classic quintet reconvening once again. They would continue releasing 45s for the reggae market, although in the early 2000s, vinyl production would cease in Jamaica. Those lists of 45s released every week, no more, as distribution shifted to a digital model. Also, the aesthetic vibes of the music beginning to change, influences of hip-hop from America becoming more stronger in Jamaica. That roots revival, unfortunately, began to slip away to some extent, though the Morgans themselves would never deviate from their musical message. 2016 would see their album, the pointedly titled Strictly Roots, win the Reggae Grammy some 20 years after their debut. They would continue intermittently in later years down to a trio of Peetah, Mr. Mojo, and Luke's, but were still active. They were involved in a variety of other projects, getting involved with cryptocurrency, as well as philanthropic projects, solo projects, their own individual lives, but the band was still very much active until Peter Morgan's sudden and unexpected passing on February 25th of 2024, one of the greatest voices of modern day reggae will no longer be heard, but we have those many classic songs that have touched so many hearts, minds, and lives over the years. We give thanks for the music Rasta Live. Thank you for watching, everybody. This has been my look at Peter Morgan and Morgan Heritage.